Oh, my name is Sherry Vaughn, and I love being married. I love that I get to talk to you today about important relationships. We're focusing on marriage today and how to feed your marriage. I've been married almost 24 years to my sweetheart, and it always hasn't been sunshine and rainbows. We have had our struggles. We have gone through grief and sorrow and been to those depths wondering, how did I get here? I didn't think my marriage was going to look like this. This is definitely not my happily ever after. I knew we needed to do something different. My parents had been married for 23 years, and although they didn't have a bad marriage, it definitely was not what I would say was a happy marriage. It wasn't good, and I saw that they were not feeding one another. We tried different things, did counseling for a while, but nothing really stuck or helped. Because once you get into those unhealthy patterns, it's hard to get out. Well, I learned a few things and gained my new tools and changed my mindset so that I could begin creating the marriage I truly desired to have. One of the first things and the biggest keys is that you need to constantly change and actually do what you are learning. Now, the answer to really improve your marriage is not in my hands. It is in yours. And I will talk to you about that today. So I need you to open up and get inside your head and open up your heart and find a way to connect with your spouse and start getting real with them. Okay? Are you ready? First question is, do you have my blueprint printed out? Because if not, you can push pause and go get that printed out. That way you can follow along as I tell you about each of these points. If you do have it, then let's dive in. So the first thing is the smoke and fire. Imagine you're sitting at a campfire and it's nice and warm and cozy and everything is great. And you're enjoying your time there with friends and family, and all of a sudden the smoke starts to come, right? And sometimes the smoke is just in one little area, and sometimes it fills up the whole area. Sometimes we say, well, I don't want to leave my spot. I'm nice and comfy. I'm sure the wind will change and it will go another direction. But if it doesn't, what do? Do we get up and walk away? The smoke is irritating, right? Sometimes we can go find a new spot. Well, in this campfire, you can see the smoke and the fire. And sometimes we walk away. So today we're going to talk about that smoke and the fire. And it's the smoke that starts killing our marriage and getting in the way. And I want you to dig deep and identify the stuff that is getting in the way of your marriage. Why? Because smoke is the number one killer in marriages and in fires. So if you think about a fire, it's usually not the fire that kills someone, it's smoke. Most die from smoke inhalation. And we spend all of our time fighting about the issues and the things that is tearing up the marriage while filling the room with smoke. So, looking at your paper, you can see it asks you about filling in the smoke. So while I'm talking, I want you to think about what causes the smoke in your marriage. These are the things that make you cry. These are the things that irritate you, the things that you fight about, the things that you argue about. I want you to write them down in the smoke. So I'm going to briefly talk about some of the things that usually tend to be the top things that people fight about. These are the things that are in their smoke. So number one thing that couples fight about is money. And it's great if you have it, but even when you have it, you fight about how you're going to spend it. Well, I wanted a boat. Well, I wanted a vacation home. You end up fighting about all these types of things, right? If couples don't have enough money, then they end up fighting about how they're spending their money. If one couple's spending more than the other, they're fighting about that. The next thing that people tend to argue a lot about is kids, parenting, all of those types of things. So did you ever think that those amazing kids that you created could cause so much stress in your marriage? National statistic is every child that you have decreases your marital satisfaction by 20%. So those of you that have 5 or more kids, you're now in the negative. So what do we do about that, right? When we have the kids, the one thing that it does do is it increases our family satisfaction. Because when we're just a couple, it's just the two of us. And even though we're a little family As we have more and add and have an increase, we get more satisfaction, right? But when we think about the kids, think about all that they need to do. They need to be carpooled, they need to be fed, we need to buy them clothes, and they take a lot of our energy, time, and resources. So many things are related to this, but you need to decide that the two of you are the most important and put yourselves first. Because if you don't, your marriage will suffer. And I'm speaking from experience. Next thing is communication. Do you have communication issues? Most of the time, the ladies want to talk and the guys not so much. Women want to talk. It's our way of communicating. But men's brains work differently, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. And sometimes you might say, honey, we need to talk. And what does your husband usually do? He backs away like, oh no, now what, right? But you're just trying to engage. You want to connect with him. You want to talk. You want to kind of get down to those issues. And men just do not communicate that way. And sometimes we end up arguing about the way we communicate. I know my husband and I have done that before because I communicate very differently than he communicates. Another thing that couples fight about are hobbies. Does your spouse have a hobby that drives you crazy? Maybe they're golfing all the time, playing video games. And what about you ladies, right? We think about some of the hobbies we have, like craft night or girls' night out. Women do this because we want to talk, we want to connect. And we'll talk a little bit about that. But our brains, that's how we communicate, is doing those types of things, talking. When you and your husband go on different trips, you don't get time to connect. So sometimes those types of hobbies will take time away from your family and time away from you together. And if you are engaged in something else or your spouse is engaged in something else, then they're not engaged with you and they're not spending that time with you. The next thing that couples fight about is sex. There may be a discrepancy between partners. One may want it more than the other. And of course, this creates tension. And this funny story is a couple had just finished having their 6th child, and the husband is really wanting to become intimate with his wife. And she says, honey, wait a minute. The doctor said that we weren't supposed to have sex for 46 weeks. And he thought, what? That can't be right. So he calls up the nurse and he's just like, okay, so my wife and I are having this conversation and she says 46 weeks. Is that right? Or is it 4 to 6 weeks? And the nurse says, honey, you have 6 kids. Leave your wife alone. Right? So sometimes we end up fighting about those types of things, and sex can get in the way if we're not communicating. Another thing that we may have discrepancies on, that's our smoke, is in-laws or family members. There's a lot of family issues that could be going on. Some of us may have in-laws that are outlaws. So we kind of make rules. Well, if we don't talk about my parents, then we're not going to fight. So then we're just going to avoid it. And that clearly is not a healthy pattern. But that's what happens when we get into this smoke. So you can think about like a story I want to share about this is, so there's a couple that's ready to divorce. And they come in and basically the story is that they're divorcing over a bathroom door. They'd been married 15 years. And she had asked him to hang this bathroom door, and he never did it. And so said, hey, you're divorcing over a bathroom door? And she said, yes. And so we say, well, if he hangs the door, will you stay married? And she says, no. And why does she say no? Because the bathroom door is not the issue. That's the smoke. What they really need to get down to is the fire, right? And so, and we love that smoke. That smoke hides us, right? When we're stuck in the smoke, we feel maybe a little bit more safe because we're not addressing the fire. It hides the holes we have. And without the fire, there's no smoke. So that's really what we need to do. We are chasing things that never change. So the next thing is we have to get into where there's smoke, there's fire. So now that you've identified the things in your smoke, how do you identify what the fire is? You need to differentiate the problems between the smoke and the fire and the things that are in your marriage that actually cause problems, and get down into the fire. So on the next page, you will see the safety. And in this, so we all know that the smoke is a consequence of fire. And until that fire is quenched, the smoke will not go away. So, like it says on there, one of those 7 items is usually what the fire is. So I'm going to talk to you about those. And the first one in the S is safety. So if you want a long-term relationship to last, you have to feel safe. If you don't feel safe, it doesn't matter what is going on, you are not going to feel safe in that relationship. And so an example of that would be if people are fighting about money, it may not be about money. Maybe they're fighting because they don't feel financially safe. So it doesn't matter how much money they have, they're still going to fight about it. The next thing in safety is physically. You have to feel physically safe. If you are in a relationship that is not safe physically, is not safe sexually, then you need to get some help. And I'm encouraging you and telling you that you need to get some help if you are in that type of a situation. The next thing is financially safe. So you don't want to go crazy. An example I always like to share is, say I go to Nordstrom's and I buy a $400 handbag. And my husband and I are fighting about this. And what the issue is for him, maybe he's not feeling financially safe because I'm spending money on things that are frivolous, and I'm spending money on those things because I don't feel appreciated. And we could go on and on about the fighting, but that's really what the core issue is that I'm not feeling appreciated and he's not feeling financially safe. And so it's not about the handbag. The next thing is that we need to feel emotionally safe. I need to feel like that I can share my heart with someone and open up and be vulnerable with them. And if I can't do that, then I'm not going to feel safe. I need to know that if I'm going to cry, that my spouse will be there for me. And I want to be able to tell him things and not feel like my heart is being stomped on. The next safety issue is mental. We don't want to feel like we're stupid. We don't want to make our partner or ourselves feel like we are less than, that we don't have the intellect to understand things. And we definitely don't like it when someone makes us feel stupid. The next thing is spiritually safe. A lot of times now we see couples who end up getting married and they may have the same religious background, and then they decide that they don't want to go that route, and that kind of rocks their spiritual world. And people start having a hard time with that. And so if you don't feel safe about sharing your actual beliefs, that can really cause some stress in a marriage regarding safety. The next factor we're going to talk about is trust. And trust is a universal principle. No matter where you go in the world, you need trust. And it is a requirement of long-term relationships. The next one is appreciation. And if you want to stay in a long-term relationship, you need to feel appreciated. We all receive appreciation in different ways. Some of us like to be touched. Some of us don't like to be. Some of us like to just talk. Some of us like to spend time with one another. We want to do those things that help us feel appreciated. And if you're familiar with the love languages, that's where this comes in very important, is understanding how we like to give and receive love. So for me, I feel appreciated when I see my husband doing things for me. Like if he's vacuuming or doing the dishes, then I know that he is appreciating me, and that's alleviating some of the things that I have to do. And the key in the appreciation is that your relationship should be appreciating, not depreciating. The next item or factor is respect. And you need to be able to respect your partner. You need to honor the potential that they have. When you give them respect, you get respect. The other thing is just to look at them through a different set of eyes and see the potential that your partner has. The next factor is validation. Long-term relationships require lots of validation. Validation is a communication principle that most of us don't know how to do very well. Everyone likes to feel like they matter, especially those that we love the most. Don't you love it when your partner actually listens to you and you feel like your opinions are being listened to and that they value what you have to say? You know, maybe they present an idea. Is it a good idea? You would hope that your partner would validate that. Predict how it will go when someone hasn't spoken up or shared their opinion for 30 years. They've been married. A lot of times we see this when couples have been married a long time and they've just like pushed things under the rug. Then all of a sudden they become irritated and they're like, hey, I have not spoken my mind for 30 years and now you're gonna hear me out. And we start to see older couples getting divorced because they haven't been able to share, they haven't been validated. And we all want to be heard. And we don't necessarily need to agree, we don't need to have the same opinions, but we need to feel like we're validated in what we're saying. We need to give respect to one another's opinions. And we want to feel like what we say matters. The next factor is encouragement. Long-term relationships require lots of encouragement. Are you encouraging your partner? I know that my hubby encourages me in all the crazy things that I do. I'm always wanting to do something new and different, and no matter what that is, we talk about it and he encourages me because he knows that that's the next thing that's gonna make me a better person. Do you encourage them to grow? You know, do they want to start a new business? Do they want to go back to school? All of those types of things. You have to be encouraging to your partner. But we don't want it to be so much so that they are controlling you. Because sometimes people will have a partner who don't want their spouse to grow, because what if they outgrow them? That also becomes an issue. But both of you need to grow your own roots and grow them deep and have a deep root system so that you can have strong roots. And so if you each have your root system and you come up together, that's kind of your identity, that you're both separate and you're growing something together strong. And as you're growing together but independently. And that's when your tree is going to be strong. That's a powerful metaphor to think about, that if you have some deep roots together, that as you grow, that you will be strong, you'll be united. And you're united in your outcome, you're united in your goals, you're united in the things that you want to do as a couple. That's encouragement. And the last thing is dedication. You want to be dedicated to your partner and your purpose. If you've already figured out an exit strategy or a plan B, you're like, okay, things are not going well, I am out of here. In the event that this doesn't work out, this is my plan to get out of this marriage. Okay, if those thoughts are in your mind, then your marriage is wavering and you need to take action. Maybe you've already started searching and evaluating, what would it take to divorce my spouse? What would that look like? If that's where you're at, you need to take some action now. And if you are letting that happen, that's where you're at. So remain committed to the vows that you've made and know that you're not the only one that is going through this type of thing. And I know that it can be really hard, but it's so much better when you can feel safe and trusted and appreciated and validated and encouraged in a relationship. Those are the starved issues. And all of the smoke, like we talked about, that is all smoke. And the things that we just talked about, the starved factors, those are the things that are the fire. Those are the things that we need to deal with in our marriages. So once you have figured out what that is, you need to begin to work on those items. Because when those needs, the starved issues, are not being met, that's when we feel starved. Those are the things that are down in that fire on that picture, right? You can see all the smoke, and that fire Those are the starved issues. And we all want to be fed. That's why we're here. You clicked on this video because you wanted to figure out, how am I going to feed my relationship? We all just want a little food, maybe even a snack, but we're all needing to be fed on a daily basis. And my quote that I like to share is, starved people starve people. So if you are starved yourself, you're not going to be able to feed someone else. And a lot of times when we're starving, we don't want to feed someone else. You know, you've got one little piece of bread, one little morsel, you're going to want to take that and not share that because you're starving yourself. So we want to be able to figure out, how can we get down into those starved issues. The next topic that I want to talk to you about is the differences in men's and women's brains, because there are differences, and this is what causes us to misunderstand one another so often. So understanding how you and your partner communicate differently will help you to maintain a healthy marriage, right? Because this marriage stuff, like, it is important. So look at the chart on that next page, and we'll talk a little bit about that. You can kind of fill it in as I talk about those different issues. So we want to be able to understand one another. Interpretations get in the way, and our heads play a huge role in that. In order to get real, we have to understand and communicate the differences that we have between men and women. So the female brain, we are hardwired to communicate. That is what we do. The male brain usually is not. Think about when you first got together. You could understand one another very easily. You're dating, you know, oh yeah, let's do this. And you're in the honeymoon phase and everything is just so perfect, right? You could communicate fine at the beginning. And then things start to change a little bit. There is a great book by a woman named Deborah Tannen called You Just Don't Understand. And she studies language and words. And on average, men say about 7,000 words per day. And they use a lot of grunting noises. Women, on the other hand, we say about 20,000 words per day. So clearly we are talking almost 3 times as much as our spouse. But men, when they're communicating for totally different reasons. When men are communicating, they are literally transferring data. I'm saying this to you, I'm saying this to you, I'm saying this to you, I'm transferring data. We're not having a conversation, we're not bonding emotionally. Men bond by action, right? Women actually bond through communication. And when a woman communicates, she actually releases oxytocin. And if you're familiar with oxytocin, this is kind of the feel-good hormone. And so when we are talking and communicating, oxytocin is being released from our brain saying, this is a good place to be. This is a safe place to be. She feels connected. And this chemical is very important. This is the main chemical that's released during orgasm. That's why they call it the cuddle hormone. It also is released when we're nursing. It's something that helps bind us to one another. Men, on the other hand, only release about half the amount of oxytocin when they are communicating. So they're not getting that full bonding feeling like we get, because when we're communicating, we have that oxytocin release. And this is why when you first started dating, you probably did a lot of activities, right? Men like to bond through activities, and so they plan things. You're going to go golfing, you're going to go bowling, you're going to go hiking, you spend a lot of time hugging and kissing. You're doing activities. And this is one of the reasons why men tend to have a higher sex drive, because they are bonding during sex and that oxytocin is released. It is a physical activity, and when they release that oxytocin, it connects. We can connect just by talking. And so sometimes think about that. If men want to be connected, they want to connect through sex because that's when they're having that oxytocin release. Is that one of the issues in your smoke? Because if it is, maybe that can help you understand and identify that potential problem and know that your husband wants to connect with you, and that's a good way for him to have that release and of the oxytocin so that he feels bonded to you. Just like you feel bonded to him talking and cuddling, it goes both ways. A man, actually, when he communicates, it is literal. Usually women make a lot of inferences, but for example, when a man says, I am full, that means the capacity of his stomach to hold food or water is full. It's completely full. There's not room for any more, right? The other thing that men do when they are communicating is that they are listening for solving problems, right? And sometimes we just want to talk to our spouse and we just want them to listen, but they're always constantly trying to figure out how to solve our problem. And we're like, I don't need you to solve my problem. I just want you to listen to me, right? So again, that can cause problems when we don't understand how does their brain work and how does our brain work, because they are differently. When a woman communicates, she is paying attention to the tone. She's paying attention to body language. She's paying attention to kind of all of those nonverbal cues that tell her what's going on. And this is where we run into problems because we will read in between the lines. That's what we are good at. But when we're reading in between the lines, we're not actually getting the clear signals all the time. And so we want to be able to be heard and understood. So I'm going to give you just a few examples so that you can kind of understand this concept a little bit better. So maybe a woman is spending some time preparing a meal and her man comes home and he only just eats a little bit of it. And she says, well, didn't you like the meal? Yeah, but I'm full. And she's thinking, well, I went to all this trouble to make, it's your favorite meal. And he's saying that he's full? Like, what's going on? And he says, yeah, I wasn't that hungry. I had a big lunch. Well, then she has her feelings hurt. She's like, great. He didn't like my cooking. He's always liked his mom's cooking better. I'm not good enough. I can't even cook right. And you can see how that list goes on in your mind when really if you're understanding the differences in how our brains work, you would avoid that whole problem, right? There are differences. Another example about how we connect. So my husband and I were out hiking and it had been quiet for a little while as we were kind of hiking up and I'm trying to breathe. And so we're finally to a spot where I'm like, oh good, well let's start talking because I want to bond, right? And so I'm telling him this whole story and basically I'm just spewing out information and he's like, yeah, I don't need all the details. I totally get it. I understand. Next topic. And I was like, what? I'm feeling hurt. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I'm like, do you know what we teach in our classes? I'm like, we're doing an activity so that you feel bonded to me. Together we're doing something, but I want to feel bonded to you by talking. And then we were fine, but it could have turned into a big fight where I was like, fine. And he could have been like, fine, well, let's just go back, and it would have ruined the whole entire experience. But because we understand how our minds work, our brains, I should say, it makes it a little bit easier and we can avoid some of that smoke. Some other interesting factors when looking at men and women's brains, even from the time when we are born, baby girls maintain more eye contact with adults, and girls watch adults more than boy babies do. And so the advantage is that we have been hardwired. The communication is nonverbal. And so 70% of that is nonverbal, right? And so if we're doing that from the time that we're babies, we are much better at it than the men are. So another study is that women were put in an MRI machine and scanned their brains. And while she was talking, she used her entire brain. So the left and the right sides kept lighting up, all the sections. But the men, when they put him in the MRI, they realized that for the most part, he was just using one side of his brain. Not very often did they go into the other side. And so, but women, when we talk, we go back and forth. We can clearly go back and forth and see the emotion. We have kind of this super highway that connects the left and right sides of our brain. And the men don't pick up on that emotion as much. And so we as women are much better at that. We have a huge advantage because of the superhighway connecting the left and right sides of our brain. And so we assimilate that information that is coming in. And so a lot of times there are miscommunications. I may be saying something or he may be saying something to me and I'm taking it in a different tone and that wasn't his intention. Because how is he communicating? He's literally usually giving data or he's speaking literal. So when women get data, we pick up on that right away. So just to recap, women may think that men are just like us, but we are different. Men usually communicate for one reason, and that is to transfer data. Their meanings are literal, and they want to solve problems. They are good problem solvers. Women communicate to bond. We want to be understood. We also kind of read in between the lines, and we think that our partner should think exactly like we do. And when they don't, we have miscommunication. So women, have you ever noticed that you have a need to be with other women? Think about the hunter-gatherer societies, right? Women were together all of the time when the men were out hunting. What about when we go to the restroom? We go to the restroom as a committee. Oh, hey, Sue, do you want to come to the restroom with me? Sure. When men go to the restroom, they are not going to the restroom to relate with one another. They're going to relieve themselves, right? When they are in there, they are not talking to anyone else. So the next thing to look at is ego. And think back when your man was trying to get you, when you were courting or dating. Men know socially that they need to turn on the charm, right? Ego is now in play. So maybe when you first started dating, you noticed how they may have been the life of the party. Everyone loves your husband. Well, at the time he would have been your boyfriend or whatever, right? He's the life of the party, right? And now you've been married 15 years and you're like, I'm dying for him to be that man again. Like, go to the party, be the life of the party, just do something to impress me, right? But in general, men like to stay at home. And why is that? Because hierarchy is in play. So you fell for them, you're married, and so now they feel safe. And again, it goes back to a safety issue, is that they don't have to do all of those other things because they're now safe. They have that safety net with you. And there's not a real big reason for them to oppress you anymore because you're together. And the safety issue is huge. Women don't usually operate this way. We usually operate without our egos like that. So think about a woman, right? We will talk to one another about, oh, hey, I went to the doctor today and I had a pap test and talk about the whole thing, right? Men would never do that, right? A man doesn't say, oh, I went and had my prostate exam today. They're just not going to do that because that would then kind of lower them on that hierarchy scale and the ego goes down. So women, we will find social networks wherever we go. We will always, wherever we're at, if we're by ourselves, we will try to engage and find someone to connect with because that's how we are generally. Think about a funeral. The wife will be, oh, that was such a beautiful funeral. We saw all of these people. I saw, Aunt Betty, and I saw, Mary Jane, and, Grandma Pearl. And the man is like, it was hard. I had to connect with people and talk, and that's just not something that comes easy for them. Men, however, bond during activity, right? So men will bond at a sporting event. Say you're going to watch a jazz game, right? Women don't go to generally watch the game. We're kind of there for the experience. They want to bond. Who am I going to talk to? But when men have the experience at a sporting event, maybe they've won the game and they're excited, and think about like if they're actually playing a game and they're like, good job, Bob, and they smack each other on the butt. Would they do that at work? No, right? But kind of in a social situation where they're like doing an activity together, they're engaging, right? They're feeling this connection. Think about even if their favorite football team is in the Super Bowl and they won. Some men will actually like get teary-eyed. They're so emotional and they're not even playing, but they are fully connecting with the game and what's going on. Women, on the other hand, back at the jazz game, right? We're at the jazz game, we're enjoying it, and then all of a sudden we see over there, oh my gosh, honey, look, it's Bob and Sue. They've been here the whole time. I can't believe it. And he's just like, shut up, man. Like they're right in the middle of like a free throw, and I'm not paying attention to any of that. I'm just noticing that way over there is Bob and Sue, right? Because I am there to connect. Another example, think about when you go out, your husband has his wallet. What does that look like? Well, for me, my husband's wallet literally is about this big. It's like the size of credit cards, right? This little thing when we go out. When we go out, what do I have? I have my purse, and inside my purse, I have my phone, I have my cards, I have tissues, I have lipstick, I have aspirin or some kind of, drug for headaches. I've got a Band-Aid, I've got a nail file, I have all these different types of things. And why is that? Because that's kind of my responsibility is to the kin, right? I'm not just taking care of myself, I'm taking care of anyone else that may need something. And it is ingrained from us from the time that we are little, that's kind of how it is. So a recap on that again, if you're filling in the boxes on your sheet, is that men bond through action. Women bond through communication. Women have that superhighway that is connecting their brains. Men, this is not as well developed. Men want to keep their ego intact. That's where you get the big fish stories. The fish was, normally maybe it was this big, but they're like, the fish was this big, right? Because they have to maintain that ego. Men are very good at listening for content. So for example, maybe we're out somewhere listening to a talk and my hubby's got his little, iPad and he's playing a game or doing something. And I'm like, are you paying attention? And he's like, yeah. And then he spits off like the last, 5 minutes and has everything in a synopsis and can tell me almost word per word things that were said. And why is that? Because he's very good at that. He's very good at listening to content where I'm listening for the overall topics and how I'm feeling, right? I'm looking for those nonverbal cues. Women usually have more eye contact. And so if we think that we are the same and that we think the same, then you're setting yourself up for disappointment. And that's not where I want you to be. I want us to be able to cut through our differences and focus on the solutions. So what are those solutions? Well, now that we understand how and why we communicate differently, how do we actually feed our relationships? So on the next page, you can see it says the daily special, right? Feeding our partner every day. So you've probably gone to a restaurant where you've seen the daily special, right? And this is something that's just done every day. Maybe it's something, something different on the menu every day, right? So I want to teach you some simple rules on how to create this daily special. So ask yourself, what is the most important thing I can do today to show my partner that I love them, right? That question helps to get into that higher part of your brain where you process and do thinking, right? That's the critical. What is the most important thing I can do today to show my spouse that I love them? And think about their day, right? So as you're thinking about their day, what can I do? Okay, well, his day looks like this. My day looks like this. Where are some times that I can, maybe send him a little text, or maybe I can call him? When will that be? You actually need to think about that, and maybe even set up a reminder in your phone of like, oh, I have a break at lunchtime, 1:00. Remember to text hubby how much I love him. And so that's kind of the first important thing, right? So think about what they're going to do even the night before, right, as you're prepping. And think about like even getting a text ready to send them. Anything that you can do to prepare for that. And these can be simple things like, cuddling on the couch together. You get to decide what that daily special will be. And so like for me, so my husband and I kind of know this daily special. So for me, yesterday he made me dinner. So not only did that feed me physically, it also fed me emotionally, right? Knowing that I have these other things that are going on and he took the time to make me dinner. So he was literally and figuratively feeding me. So that's what I love about this is offering this daily special is that you actually do it, right? And don't tell them that you're doing it. Just do that. Just do it. Just serve them. And you want to be able to adjust this menu accordingly, right? This can be something that you do every day, right? So maybe every day you decide sometime during the day, I'm going to be thinking about my husband and I'm going to just send him a little text. Great. That's what you've decided is going to work well for you. Or maybe you decide that you are going to give them a passionate kiss in the morning. When you're both leaving for work or whatever you do, you decide that that's what you're going to do. If you want to do something the same every day, you can, or you can switch it up. So if you switch it up, that's where I say, hey, you got to head back into the kitchen. Look for something new and exciting and try that. And maybe you try something, it doesn't work. That's okay, right? They still know that you love them. The idea is that you're just trying something new, right? Sometimes those specials are not great, and that's okay. But as long as you're doing it, that's the important part. So how do we make the changes that we desire in our relationships? It's day to day. It's those day-to-day activities, and that's why the daily special is really so important in your marriage. So the first thing that when we're doing this is that we're building up our relationships. We have to keep working on it. We have to keep trying. Sometimes people just give up and they decide, you know what, this is too hard, right? It's like climbing a mountain, and at some point you're just too tired and you don't want to go on. You just say, okay, I'm done, right? And that's where we see a lot of divorce. That's not where we want to be. The next thing that we need to do is we need to keep learning. And so if you keep having the same problems and the same experiences, that is a learning problem, right? So if you haven't learned the lesson, it's going to keep repeating itself. And so finally, you need to keep changing. So you've learned the lesson. Now you actually need to make the changes. You've been learning, but now you got to change. That's the most important part, is the actual change. And that may mean altering your routine, altering your awareness. When you learn something new, you can't just get into the same patterns that you were doing before. Think about if any of you have ever tried to change your morning routine. Okay, well, now I'm going to add exercise into my routine. You have to do that every day. Otherwise, when the alarm goes off and you hit the snooze button, it becomes easier and easier to just not go. So it's actually something that you have to implement every day and have a different solution. You could go back and ask your spouse for feedback. So this may mean there's so if you're changing, you want to have some feedback. So you ask your spouse, what can I do? So the question may be to ask your partner, if you don't want to go there, then maybe you know that that's something that you need to look at. And so you need to kind of ask a powerful question and getting that feedback from your spouse. And ask them, honey, on a scale of 1 to 10, how do you feel loved by me this week? Right? That's going to give you some good feedback, but you have to be able to ask those powerful questions so that they know where you're at. And so if I've been slacking on my responsibilities and I've been really busy and I haven't paid attention to my spouse and I get a 5, then I know, okay, I know, yeah, probably is a 5. So that means next week I get to try harder. And so then I try harder, and then the next week I ask him the same question. How do you feel? Well, I feel like it's a 9 or a 10, right? Because you've made those improvements. So that's the key thing, is that as you're building and you're learning and you're creating, you're changing with those routines. And that may require that you actually have to change and look at how you're doing things and have an honest conversation with your spouse. And I can teach you how to get real with your partner. And when it's done with the spirit of inviting and understanding and compassion, it's better received. And that allows you to lift one another up instead of tearing one another down. And that's a whole other section about how to get real. Maybe for another time. But I really love what I do, ladies. This time, I know that we're limited to about an hour, so I don't want to take up too much of your time. But it seems like an hour is never long enough for something that you are passionate about. Even though I may not know who you are, I love you. That is something that I have been blessed with, a gift to be able to just love those that I don't even know. And I love you. And I want you to know that you are loved. You are loved by so many people that you don't even know. And I know your struggles. I've been there. I know what it's like to when you start thinking about walking away from a marriage. That becomes very difficult and it's hard. And you think, I thought I would never have these problems. Or perhaps you've thought, I'm not good enough to truly have a good marriage, so this is just what I'm stuck with. But ladies, I don't want you to be in that space one more minute. So I'm asking you to take a stand and to make a change, make a commitment to change. Once I understood that in my own marriage, understood that if I want things to look differently, that means I have to change first. I can't sit around and wait for my partner to change and hope that things will just magically get better, because they won't. That requires change on our part, ladies. And so I am asking you to make that commitment today to yourself to make that change. And when I began to do that, I saw the changes in our marriage. As soon as I began to be a better person, I saw things improve in our marriage. So I've designed a space, ladies, where you can connect with me and learn more about the principles that I teach at Endeavor Mentoring. These are things like character, communication, companionship, commitment. These are principles that we need to have in our marriages. And you can connect with me in a number of ways. I have a 12-week program that is designed to teach you these principles and will help transform your marriage by having weekly couples meetings that will hold you accountable. Will hold you accountable for your progress. And that is the best value that I have for you. I also have a 6-week workshop that is designed to help build your marriage. We also have fun date nights, and those are designed to give you some quick tips and tricks of things that you can implement right away. These are usually hands-on, and they're quite entertaining, and they are a great addition to your weekly date night. So for more details about my programs and the workshops, please go to my website, endeavormentoring.com. You can also find me at Facebook and Instagram. I put my email and phone number on the blueprint because I want to be able to connect with you. I want to talk to you. So if you need to have a one-on-one conversation with me, then I would like to have that with you. We can talk about the situations that you're in and how I can assist you. Because you've stuck around to the end of my presentation today and you have my blueprint, you can probably see that I am offering a free assessment of the health of your relationship. And this is a very comprehensive, I don't want to say exam, but it's a comprehensive assessment. There are 50 questions and they are true or false. And so I tell people when they're taking it, if you feel like it is true at all, you need to mark true. And you need to be honest with yourself. Because if you're kind of willy-nilly back and forth, then my assessment of what's going on is not going to give you true feedback. So if you want good feedback, you need to be honest. I will provide that assessment for you through email, and I will send you your results back on email. And then I'm also offering a free consultation. So if you want to be able to talk about your results or you have questions, then we can go into details about that. So if you know that you are ready to make a change in your marriage, then I want you to click on the Learn More button link, because I have several opportunities for you to improve what your relationship will look like in 2019. So the bottom line, ladies, is I want you to get out of the smoke so that you can put out the fire. We need to put out the fire so there isn't smoke. And when we're in that fire, those are the real problems. And I want to teach you how to get real with your partner. Men and women are different. We need to honor that, the fact that we are different. We're complementary to one another. And together we are more powerful than we are separately. And being committed to serving and loving your partner every day is one of the most important things that you can do. And know that I am cheering you on. I already told you how much I love you, and I want you to know that. I want you to know that I pray for the women who are struggling, because I know what it's like to be in that space. And I hope that you as a woman will decide that that's what you want to do, that you want to be that change so that you can start having the marriage that you want. So I just pray that you will be brave and that you will take that next step. And may you continue to create a marriage that you truly desire and love every day. Thank you so much, ladies, for listening, and I hope you have a beautiful day, and I hope to hear from you soon. Thanks so much.